Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll uncover what the monstrous Bambi really is. Within the vast and shadowy Poohniverse, few reinterpretations of classic characters have managed to disturb viewers' minds as deeply as the monstrous Bambi, the imposing and terrifying creature introduced in Bambi. The Reckoning, released in July 2025. This version is not merely a reinvention of the gentle fawn we all once knew. It is the complete transformation of an icon of innocence into a colossal, unstoppable, and tragically vengeful beast. A symbol of pain turned into fury, and of nature violently reclaiming everything that humanity once took from it. This mutated Bambi is not just an antagonist. He is a primal force, a brutal embodiment of a shattered natural balance. He combines the body horror of a deformed creature with the emotional intensity of an animal that has experienced loss, abandonment, and rage. His mere presence on screen evokes both fear and sorrow, solidifying him as one of the most imposing, complex, and visually unforgettable villains in the Poohniverse. When the project was first announced, many fans and critics doubted that a story based on Bambi could sustain the dark and violent tone of this cinematic universe. However, The Reckoning not only surpassed expectations, it became one of the cornerstones of the modern horror genre, inspired by twisted fairy tales. The film reimagines the classic story through a post-apocalyptic and ecological lens, where nature's vengeance manifests through grotesque mutations and the moral collapse of humankind. The new Bambi emerges after exposure to chemical and radioactive waste, which warps both his body and mind. Once an ordinary deer, he transforms into a colossal predator, imbued with monstrous strength, sharp intelligence, and an uncontrollable thirst for revenge. His mission is clear and devastating: to avenge the deaths of his mother and family at the hands of humans. In this video, we'll explore the origins of this creature within the Poohniverse in depth, tracing his evolution from childhood innocence to his terrifying metamorphosis. We'll analyze his physical design, psychology, instincts, powers, and even his weaknesses, because understanding the monster is, in a way, understanding the pain that created him. The story begins as a classical tragedy. Young Bambi enjoys the peace of the forest alongside his mother, until a hunter named Michael bursts into his life and takes away the most precious thing he had. The trauma of that moment marks him forever. Yet the little fawn survives, and over time he grows into a majestic adult red deer, strong, determined, and fiercely protective of what he loves. He finds comfort in Fallon, a doe with whom he builds a family and has a fawn, trying to rebuild a life in a world slowly being destroyed by pollution and human greed. But fate strikes again. Fallon is killed by a truck belonging to Wilbexer Pharmaceutics, a corporation transporting toxic and radioactive waste. The tragedy turns into rage. In a desperate attempt to defend the forest, Bambi confronts the driver, Simon, but is brutally defeated. The humans, indifferent to the destruction they cause, dump the waste into a nearby river, poisoning the entire ecosystem. Devastated, without his mate and with his fawn missing, Bambi drinks from the contaminated water, and that's where his transformation begins. His body warps, his size multiplies, his skin becomes covered in sores and scars, and his eyes glow with a sickly radiance. The creature that emerges is no longer the deer he once was. Now he is a gigantic monster, a spectral guardian of the woods who embodies the wrath of nature. His mind fills with distorted memories and unbearable pain, and his only purpose becomes vengeance against those who destroyed his home. Yet the mutation doesn't affect him alone. Other animals of the forest, including his old friend Thumper, the rabbit, also suffer hideous transformations. The forest, once a symbol of life and harmony, turns into a nightmarish realm where the wildlife has mutated into aggressive, disfigured, and feral creatures. The human conflict soon arrives. On a freezing winter night, Sanaa and her son Benji venture into the forest by taxi to celebrate Thanksgiving with the family of the boy's father, Simon, who, ironically, will not be present. Unaware of the danger, they enter forbidden territory, Bambi's domain. Meanwhile, the Wilbexer Corporation, aware of the catastrophe it caused, hires a group of professional hunters to eliminate the monster and erase all evidence of their guilt. But the forest no longer belongs to humans. Bambi senses every step, every breath, every intrusion. As night falls, he detects the presence of Sanaa and Benji and perceives them as a direct threat. What follows is a brutal hunt, a night of terror where mutated nature rises up against humanity. Bambi. The Reckoning does more than reinterpret Disney's classic fawn. It transforms a tale of innocence and loss into an ecological nightmare, a story of revenge where the victim becomes the predator. In the end, the monstrous Bambi stands as a living warning. When nature decides to strike back, there is no escape. Bambi rams with overwhelming force into the vehicle carrying Sanaa, her son Benji, and the driver, causing the metal to twist and the glass to shatter like paper. The impact is so violent that the car flips several times before landing on its side, completely wrecked. The monster's massive weight crushes the vehicle against the ground, caving in the roof and triggering a partial engine explosion. The driver dies instantly, without even having time to scream, while Sanaa and Benji, covered in blood and shards of glass, manage to pry open the back door and stumble out into the forest. Terrified and disoriented, they run through the woods until they reach an old farmhouse, the home of Mary, Simon's mother and Benji's grandmother. At first glance, the elderly woman seems to suffer from dementia. She mutters incoherent phrases, mixes up names, and doesn't fully recognize her grandson. However, as the night progresses, something deeply unsettling becomes apparent. Mary keeps repeating the name Bambi, staring out toward the forest through an open window, as if in a trance, unknowingly calling out to the creature. Her behavior hints at a dark connection, as though the forest itself were speaking through her. The illusion of calm shatters in seconds. Bambi bursts into the house like a storm of flesh and fury. Windows explode, walls tremble, and the monster charges with such force that the ground itself shakes. Inside, Andrew, Simon's brother, tries to defend his family alongside his wife Harriet and their son Harrison, but the creature shows no mercy. It smashes through the door, impales Harriet with its antlers, and brutally tears her apart, leaving behind a scene straight out of a nightmare. Bleeding and wounded, Andrew manages to escape with his son, while Sanaa, Benji, and Mary rush toward a camper parked near the house. Screaming, the group barely escapes with their lives as, behind them, the forest roars with the monster's wrath. But their escape is far from safe. Driving down a dark road, they suddenly find a massive tree trunk blocking their path. Andrew gets out to move it, but just then Bambi emerges from the trees. In panic, Benji slams his foot on the gas, trying to flee. The trunk shifts unexpectedly, trapping Andrew's leg. The camper speeds off, dragging him violently across the pavement as he screams in agony. The sound of metal bones and despair blend into a horrifying symphony. Finally, Andrew dies in a gruesome and heartbreaking way, leaving his son Harrison utterly alone. Lost and traumatized, Harrison runs into the forest, with Bambi following close behind. His ragged breathing mixes with the crunch of leaves as the creature relentlessly pursues him. The boy trips and falls, pretending to be dead, holding his breath while the massive shadow of the deer looms over him. By sheer luck, a distant noise, a crack, perhaps from another mutated animal, distracts Bambi, giving the child a miraculous chance to escape. In his desperate attempt to survive, Harrison ventures deeper into the forest, where he encounters Thumper, the rabbit who was once Bambi's friend. But Thumper is no longer the cheerful animal he used to be. He's now a wild, grotesque creature with glowing eyes and deformed teeth. His mutated siblings surround him. Harrison tries to retreat, but falls into a bear trap, rendering him helpless. The animals pounce on him, tearing him apart with inhuman savagery, like a swarm of tiny predators straight out of Critters, leaving only the echo of his screams fading among the trees. Meanwhile, Sanaa, Benji, and Mary continue their escape, but the van eventually runs out of fuel. They stop along a remote dirt road, unaware that Bambi is following them from a distance, watching with silent hatred. Amid the tension, Mary, drawn by a strange compulsion, wanders alone into the woods. There, among twisted roots and rotting trunks, she discovers the monster's lair, an underground den-like nest covered in human bones, animal hides, and the wreckage of destroyed vehicles. It's a macabre tableau that makes one thing clear: the forest no longer belongs to the living. The moment of horror reaches its peak when Bambi emerges from the darkness, forcing the group to flee once again. In their desperation, they encounter Michael, the hunter who years earlier had killed Bambi's mother. He leads them to a cabin where they finally come face to face with Simon, now the leader of a team of hunters hired by the Wilbexer Corporation. There, amidst chaos, Simon confesses the truth. He is responsible not only for the death of Bambi's mate, but also for his mutation. The toxic waste his company dumped into the river caused the entire catastrophe. Enraged, Sanaa confronts him directly, accusing him of dooming not only the forest, but his own child as well. Benji, paralyzed by fear and confusion, witnesses the argument before stepping out of the cabin and into the night. While exploring the area, Benji discovers a hidden garage where hunters Tyler and Eddie are torturing a small deer. Horrified, he realizes it's Bambi's fawn, the last link the beast has to its past. Simon and Michael plan to use the young deer as bait to lure Bambi in and kill him, regardless of how many lives it might cost. Vengeance arrives swiftly. Tyler ventures into the forest to set traps, but Bambi finds him first. The monster decapitates him in a single strike, leaving his corpse grotesquely hanging from the branches. Hearing the screams, Eddie rushes to investigate and stumbles upon the horror. He jumps into his truck, trying to escape, but Bambi smashes through the window with his antlers, impales him, and rips him apart without mercy. With the hunters dead, Benji frees the young deer and flees with him into the woods. At that moment, Bambi storms into the cabin, tearing down walls and furniture in his path. Inside, Mary remains motionless, almost entranced. Before the monster can attack her, one of the camera operators filming the hunt makes a noise to distract it. In a final act of heroism, she fires at nearby gas tanks, causing an explosion that engulfs the cabin in flames. The blast kills the woman and knocks Mary unconscious, but only wounds the monster, which emerges from the fire even more enraged than before. Outside, amidst the smoke and debris, Sanaa, Simon, Benji, and Michael regroup. Exhausted, bloodied, and covered in ash, they brace themselves for what they know will be the final phase of their nightmare, the ultimate confrontation with Bambi, the monster humanity created, and the one now determined to exact its vengeance in fire and blood. Bambi bursts forth once again, emerging from the smoke and flames like a living shadow from hell. His silhouette stands out against the firelight, revealing the full magnitude of his fury and colossal size. With an earth-shaking roar, he charges straight at Michael, trapping him between his deformed antlers and lifting him several meters into the air. The hunter screams, but his voice is drowned out by the monster's deafening bellows. Bambi thrashes violently, tearing the man's body apart before hurling him against a tree, where he is impaled, left to die in slow, excruciating agony. Without pausing, The beast turns its massive head back toward the others, dragging its heavy hooves across the ash-covered ground. Sanaa clutches Benji tightly, trying to shield him behind her, while the small fawn, Bambi's offspring, trembles by her side. Simon, realizing he has no escape, watches in horror. For the first time, he seems to understand the magnitude of the monster he helped create. In a final act of late-blooming humanity, he looks his son in the eyes and apologizes with a trembling voice. Then, overcome by fear, he flees toward his vehicle. But his attempt to escape lasts only seconds. As he starts the engine, a small, twisted figure crawls out from the back seat. Thumper the rabbit, now deformed by mutation, covered in scars, and stripped of all innocence. In an instant, he leaps onto Simon with savage ferocity. The man's screams mix with the wet, sickening sound of tearing flesh. Thumper devours him brutally, biting his face and neck until his cries fade into silence. The vehicle comes to a halt, soaked in blood, as the mutant rabbit leaps through the shattered window and vanishes into the trees. At that very moment, Sanaa and Benji make an unexpected and deeply human choice. They return the small fawn to his father. The gesture changes everything. For the first time in the entire film, Bambi's gaze loses part of its rage and reveals something almost forgotten: compassion. The monster stops before them, staring at his offspring with a faint glow in his deformed eyes. Sanaa realizes that his fury was never mindless. Bambi did not kill for pleasure, but out of a primal instinct to protect. Every attack, every victim, was the result of the fear and grief of a father who had lost everything. However, the truce doesn't last. From the ground, a dying Michael, covered in blood and barely conscious, raises his weapon with the last of his strength. Between ragged breaths and curses, he fires a burst of bullets that strike Bambi's side, tearing deep wounds into his flesh. The monster roars in agony, staggering as blood pours from his chest. In that instant, Mary appears, armed, her expression calm but resolute. Without hesitation, she shoots Michael in the chest, ending his threat once and for all. The silence that follows is almost sacred. Bambi, grievously wounded, breathes heavily. Blood mixes with the snow and mud, creating a grotesque contrast. Before him, his fawn lets out a heart-wrenching cry, a sound more human than animal, as if it understands its father's inevitable fate. Bambi looks at him one last time, his eyes, one white, one yellow, slowly dim, and the creature collapses onto the forest floor, exhausted, defeated but not entirely dead. The camera slowly pulls back, bathing the scene in melancholy. The young fawn approaches his father's body, nuzzling it gently as a faint shimmer passes across his fur. The contaminated water continues to flow through the forest, hinting that the cycle of mutation is far from over. The Poohniverse leaves the door open for his return, whether through the resurrection of Bambi himself or through the transformation of his son into a new nightmare. The Monstrous Bambi is not merely a terrifying reinterpretation of the classic fawn. It is a symbolic creature, a reflection of ecological destruction, nature's vengeance, and the corruption of innocence. His design combines the majesty of a deer with the brutality of a mutant predator, resulting in a presence impossible to ignore. His size far surpasses that of a normal red deer. Standing on all fours with his head raised, he reaches over 3 meters in height, and when he rises on his hind legs, he easily towers close to 5 meters, comparable to a Kodiak bear or even a small theropod dinosaur. His body is a fusion of muscle and fury, a broad chest, massive legs, and an arched back that radiates constant tension and power. His antlers are his most distinctive and lethal feature. Gigantic and branching, their edges are as sharp as rusted blades, resembling a bony defense structure more than a natural ornament. The tips are stained with dried blood and metallic residue, a grim reminder that Bambi has impaled more than one victim. His face is the true center of horror. The elongated, deformed snout appears fractured in several places, with strips of skin hanging loosely. His black, wet nose breathes heavily, producing an animalistic rasp. His mouth, now unnaturally wide, reveals irregular, pointed teeth, some protruding from the lower jaw like those of a wild boar. One of his eyes is completely white, dead and opaque, while the other gleams with a yellowish hue that shifts with the light, glowing more intensely when enraged. Long, dirty tufts of fur hang from beneath his jaw, tangled with branches and leaves, emphasizing his feral appearance. His coat blends reddish tones with dark browns and grayish patches resembling burns or necrosis, the result of exposure to toxic waste. In some areas, his skin splits open, revealing muscle tissue and scarred flesh beneath. His legs are powerful enough to shatter bones with a single blow. His cracked, deformed hooves act like cutting weapons. Each step leaves a deep imprint, accompanied by a wet, metallic sound, as if the earth itself were bleeding under his weight. His ears, large and torn, bear the marks of countless battles. But the most disturbing part of his anatomy lies along his back. Visible spines, bony extensions protruding from his vertebrae, partially covered in skin and dried blood. They seem to be a defensive mutation, as though Bambi's body had evolved a biological armor. From a behavioral standpoint, Bambi is a complex creature. He acts with instinctive intelligence, remembering his enemies, avoiding traps, and attacking with surgical precision. Yet he also displays clear emotions, especially regarding loss and the protection of his offspring. He is not a soulless monster. He is a sentient being consumed by grief and rage, which makes him all the more tragic and terrifying. His greatest weakness lies in that same lingering humanity. When he faces his son or recognizes familiar faces from his past, his fury falters. Physically, his mutated body makes him resistant to conventional weapons, but vulnerable to internal injuries and blood loss, such as those caused by Michael's final shot. All these zombie-like qualities, combined with his animal ferocity, colossal size, and grotesque appearance, make the monstrous Bambi a truly terrifying, visually overwhelming, and emotionally disturbing creature. He doesn't just impress through brutality or horror, but through the haunting balance between tragedy and savagery that defines him. He is a beast born from pain, molded by loss, and deformed by human hands, a living embodiment of grief and vengeance, which firmly establishes him as one of the most chilling, symbolic, and unforgettable beings in the Poohniverse. Bambi's personality is far more complex than it appears at first glance. Before his mutation, he was an ordinary deer, innocent, gentle, and deeply attached to his family. His life revolved around the calm of the forest, maternal love, and the natural instinct for survival. But everything changed after the tragedy. The loss of his mother, the destruction of his home, and the exposure to toxic waste completely transformed him. That mixture of pain, rage, and suffering altered not only his body but also his mind. After the mutation, his intelligence increased dramatically, allowing him to understand, plan, and, most importantly, remember. His main motivation became vengeance, a burning desire to punish the humans who took everything he loved. During this stage, Bambi becomes an unstoppable force of nature, a silent executioner who hunts with surgical precision and leaves behind a trail of devastation. However, his rage is not entirely irrational. Over time, his behavior evolves. His violence transforms into a territorial instinct, a need to protect the forest that was once his home. Any intruder, human or animal, is seen as a threat that must be eliminated. Despite his brutality, Bambi is not a soulless monster. Beneath his ferocity still beats a trace of compassion, especially visible in his interactions with characters who represent innocence or purity, such as Benji, Sanaa, and Mary, whom he spares instead of devouring. His reunion with his offspring confirms that, deep down, fragments of his former self still remain. The father who seeks to protect his child, not the monster that kills without reason. This inner conflict between the beast and what's left of his animal humanity makes him a tragic, multidimensional character. Not just terrifying, but profoundly sorrowful. In terms of physical prowess and combat ability, the monstrous Bambi is practically a killing machine. His strength surpasses any natural limit known for a deer. He can flip vehicles, knock down trees, crush walls, and tear human bodies apart with terrifying ease. His size, between 2 and 3 meters while on all fours, makes him a colossus of tense muscle and reinforced bone. His speed and agility are equally impressive. He moves with an almost unnatural fluidity, capable of traversing forests, swamps, and rocky terrain without losing balance, and can catch his prey even when they flee in vehicles. His tactical intelligence elevates him above most mutant creatures in the Poohniverse. He can anticipate his enemies' movements, set ambushes, and use the environment to his advantage. On several occasions, he is seen acting with deliberate strategy, as if remembering every past mistake and correcting it in the next attack. His endurance is equally superhuman. He can withstand gunfire, explosions, and open wounds without stopping, driven by a mix of anger, adrenaline, and pain. Bambi's senses are at a superhuman level. His hearing can detect the snap of a twig hundreds of meters away. His sense of smell can pick up blood or fear from his victims. And his vision, even with one damaged eye, can detect movement in total darkness. His antlers, massive and sharp like spears, serve both as offensive and defensive weapons. His fangs, a result of mutation, grant him a bite powerful enough to crush bone, while his hooves, now more akin to claws, serve as blunt weapons, capable of tearing through flesh and metal alike. But even the most fearsome monsters have vulnerabilities. Bambi can be distracted or emotionally manipulated, especially when confronted with memories of his past or the presence of his offspring. This connection to his paternal instinct is his greatest weakness. It humanizes him, but also exposes him. It was precisely this vulnerability that allowed Michael to wound him gravely, taking advantage of the moment Bambi lowered his guard during his reunion with his son. Despite his immense resilience, he is not invulnerable. High-caliber weapons or concentrated explosions can inflict severe damage, and while his metabolism is accelerated, he still requires time to fully heal. However, signs of advanced cellular regeneration suggest that his body may be capable of recovering even from mortal injuries, raising the possibility that he never truly died. This idea leaves the door open for his return, perhaps more deformed, more powerful, or even through his son as a mutant successor. Ultimately, the monstrous Bambi is not merely a creature of physical horror, but a metaphor for suffering, loss, and the corruption caused by human interference in nature. His design, his story, and his emotional duality elevate him beyond the realm of a simple monster. He is a walking tragedy, a predator driven by pain and lost love, and one of the most imposing and symbolically rich presences within the Poohniverse.